Okay. Um, Thanks. I'd like to welcome everybody to, excuse me, the Facilities Management Transportation Committee meeting for April 4th, 2022. And is there any public comment on the agenda?
There is not any public comment.
Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lally.
Thank you, Mrs. Epstein. It's a very short agenda this evening, but we'll start with the middle school. And as we know, we moved in, and the enthusiasm and energy is still great throughout the school. It's really nice to be there and see it on, the students and the teachers and everyone's face. It's a great building. So I know we can say that over and over, but it really is a fantastic building. So just as an overview, we wanted to start with letting everyone know kind of what to expect for September, October of next year, what you can expect to see on the site. So Dave, if you can, next slide, please. So you'll see that where the blue is there, that's a retention basin, and then you see the softball field, baseball field, with a couple soccer fields in there. That will mainly just be grass and seed at that point. So come September, that'll be grass and seed, obviously. And then it's about a year process before we actually get on it and play for the grass to actually take and mature. So, but parking and as far as the overall plan for student drop-off and student pickup, it'll be as we designed and in its final phase, the way it should operate much more safely and effectively than we were doing previously. So, it's going to be really exciting. I think the year might seem a little long for the grass to mature and the fields to take over. But again, we're in really good hands with Plymouth Township, and what they're allowing our middle school students to do for activities has been phenomenal. So. Right, so you have what you have there is the bus area, so where the buses will actually be able to park versus the parking lot. So where Dr. Christian showed, like coming in off of New Hope, where the buses could come in. So the buses in that first area, next to the detention basins, will be where the buses will go. So the buses will go in there, and they'll have assigned parking, and again, that'll take a lot of traffic off the roads too. Which anyone that's been by the middle school during arrival or dismissal knows it's pretty difficult to get around. So that's going to be, and then right to the bottom of the screen, that's where you'll have staff parking, visitor parking, and things like that. So you can go to the next slide, please, Dave. Yep. Sure.
What is the? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So
they're going to come in from that road to the right of the bushes.
Cars will all come off of Belvoir,
right,
and they'll circle around the parking.
So they'll go around.
Yeah.
Can you point, Mike? You want to point it?
Come right in here, circle around here.
Yeah.
And then they back to Belvoir.
Yeah.
Buses will all come in here, park in a chevron.
Right.
And then release the cars in the buses for cars.
Gotcha.
Right.
Right now, this area is cafeteria.
Right.
So currently, buses come in off of New Hope. That road's open. So we don't have any. They have a little one. They go around the whole building, drop off kids' energy for the next 2.5. And then we have a little parent drop off at grade. So safe pathway where they run in those big concrete barriers. They get out of their cars like 5 times, and there's a walkway, a private dedicated walkway, walk right up.
And when it's fully operational, they'll do that. But will those concrete barriers be gone?
They'll be gone because this will all be a brand new. It's all temporary parking.
Right.
And you'll have sidewalk in between the two of them. So walkers.
That's a sidewalk. Gotcha.
So they can drop off here, walk up. Like actually, we estimate the present in the current building when we were in the old building, 25 parking.
Yeah, we're looking at about 60.
Plus, we're seeing some improvement already. Joe and I were out there first couple of days, and we were asking the eighth graders because they knew they would tell us exactly what was going on, and they said it's definitely. And then we went out and watched Belvoir. There's definitely fewer cars. There's still some, but it moves a lot faster.
And the hopefully short-lived problem of people using Maplewood to drop off has stopped?
I haven't heard anything. It's been good, so hopefully
Okay.
it remains good.
Yeah, we'll continue to monitor those areas, but
And I have a question, and again, this is always helping me remember. I believe we had a discussion at some point about turfing any parts of that field so it would be used quicker. Can you remind me what that was and because, I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of people asking that question, and just help remind all of us so that we can answer them.
We did, but we also saw that the cost of the project was approaching $80 million. So as much as I think the board was considering it, just combined with where we were with the budget, we decided to stay with grass rather than, when you add a synthetic field, you're looking at a minimum of $1 million plus. So it was really, construction costs were very high at the time. We had gotten, when we rebid the GC, we had gotten competitive pricing, and so we wanted to stay in that 79 range.
And then, so for one more year, we'll be proceeding as we've done this year with our middle school sports and gym and all of those kinds of things. So one more year till all the fabulous.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe by next spring we can get lucky and have a few things on campus, but
Gotcha.
probably one more year.
and there is, Dr. Christian, an alternate we discussed for sod instead of seeding. So I can look into that and get back and see what
We
difference
can
that makes.
take a look at where we are with the project and the final costs.
Right, so I can take a look at that. So
That would be
sod would, adhere faster. It just takes a lot of diligent watering because it dies pretty easy.
Right.
The gray road that the buses take on now, is that going to, in October, first question is that going to still continue to be in use once everything's done? Or is that just kind of emergency?
That's just a required emergency.
Okay.
Yeah,
You have to be able to get a fire truck around the whole building in case of emergency.
Right. So that was more for safety of the building with the fire marshal. Okay. They could get around the entire building. So there is a gate an arm gate that'll be put up there, not a physical gate, but that'll be there, that the township will be able to use through a Knox box if they have an emergency or something to get through, and then use the road in the event of emergency.
And all of our deliveries are in the back of the building as well, too. So the food trucks and everything need to get back there.
And then this says October. Does that mean in September it's going to be different?
No, I think at October, just to be honest with you, Mr. Carpenter, was us looking at the full picture of what we put as an explanation on the side, which is remaining site fill and construction fields and things like that to be completed. So, but we fully anticipate the arrival and dismissal plan to be in action for the start of school.
I just had a comment and then a question. My comment was just going to say thank you for the safety, the cement blocks. I've drop off for a student and it is safe until parents or kids are fumbling in the car and it holds up the line. But other than that, I feel that my child is safe. It feels a little like New York.
The Jersey barriers, the concrete barriers.
Yes.
North Jersey.
And then question, if I missed this, I apologize. Is there going to be a track field on the athletic fields?
There is going to be a track on the football field to the left of the screen, the football field will get done again, and then the track will get redone again. So yeah, that'll be on the left in the football field. It's currently where the teachers are parking now. You're welcome.
One question.
Sure.
Sorry. Back to that, Matt. Yeah. Is there going to be like a, I know you said something about emergency services if they need to get in there. Is there going to be like a faster cut through that they can use somewhere along the line, or they're going to pull up the same way like the normal parent drop off or whatever? I mean, I didn't know if maybe off the police, something.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
There are curb cuts into the police, and so anybody from the township can get in very quickly.
Yeah, so if you look on Maplewood, you'll see there's actually a curb cut back there. If you drive down the cul-de-sac and circle around and come out, you'll see a big curb cut where a vehicle would be able to access through that back way. But again, there'll be another arm there stopping it, so it's not local traffic or someone that can go through, so that the neighbors, hopefully don't get any traffic back there.
Joe, the track that Gail just asked about, is that going to be back to a cinder track like it was, or are we going to have the kind of track we have at the high school?
It is set to be cinder track.
Could you, with the alternates, find out what it would cost to put in better than a cinder track?
Absolutely. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, go on to the next slide. So the next slide is just letting you know where we are in the demolition process. We're very excited that we were able to get PICO on board as quickly as we could, and that they were able to shut gas off and electric in the actual same week. I did say that is a fact. I was shocked myself. I never would have gambled on that. But they did shut them both off the same week, and we laid the schedule out with Dewey and the contractors that we hope to be in demolition early April. But the fact that we were actually taking parts of the building down on March 31st was, for me, very exciting because it's another indicator that, we're going to hit our target that, like Mr. Carpenter said, what's it going to look like in September. So getting this old building down. So you can see that there's asbestos removal, there's demolition permits, there's a lot of work with the township on a daily basis. There's air monitoring. So nothing really changes as far as whether the building was occupied or unoccupied when it comes to asbestos, because you have to remove it before you can knock it down. You have to have a manifest to say that you did it correctly. So what you're seeing there is just the abatement that's going on inside. And the two pictures to the right, you're seeing when the electric was on, and the picture on the left, you're seeing with probably some generator light, and that's why it's kind of dark. So we can go to the next slide. And the next slide shows to the far left there, you'll see that is the stack of solar panels that are going to be recycled there on the left-hand side that you see it look in a greenish aqua kind of color there. And then you can see in the center photo and the photo to the far right that we've started the demolition. And that's the gymnasium and the front parking lot that you're seeing coming down right now. So as of today, they're actually into the inner light court with their machinery, and the offices are down. And so the asbestos crew is on what we would call second base, because it was a diamond, and everyone that went to the school knew it, I think, by bases. So we're on the backside now at second base, and we have about another 2 weeks of asbestos removal. It's mainly floor tile, and it's mainly all things that are not friable, meaning it's not airborne or particularly dangerous, but you have to remove it the correct way. So again, that's the abatement, and that's the demolition of where we are. Are there any questions on the demolition? Okay, great. Next item on the agenda.
Joe,
sorry,
just
sure.
one quick question. I just wanted to know, with the demolition so far, have we had any complaints from the neighbors about noise?
That's a great question. Actually, we believe it or not, we received the opposite. A couple neighbors across from Belvoir Road sent a text message in saying they were glad to see the water trucks there and that we were actually watering already, so that you're trying to keep the construction dust down. So that will be a challenge on windy days, because no matter how much water we use, but we're well aware through the process, so we're kind of already educated on what can happen in that area if it gets windy, because we saw it with the construction of the new school. So next on the item is just a brief update on the Plymouth White Marsh softball field upgrades. So we've been talking about some upgrades on these softball fields for a little while now. First, I think it's really important to say that the fields themselves, it's a fantastic field. These are just upgrades that we felt were necessary, and it would make the softball field closer to, say, the boys' baseball field. So there was a couple things we did with new fencing that was installed at the backstop. There was a fence extended on the cage of the bullpen, and we trenched an outlet from home plate over to the batting cages down the right field line, so they could put a machine in there that could actually pitch, and you could actually hit inside the machine. So I'll have some pictures of that in the next couple slides. What's in process that we agreed to do is put dugouts in. So there's a tentative schedule there to design the dugouts. We've been talking about it since February. The goal would be to get something out in May, an award in July. And I know there might not always be a July school board meeting, so we might have to work that date out. But and then a notice to proceed in August with construction starting in late August through November. This would make the field available and it wouldn't have any interruption for their season next year. So it's also a very good time for us to put a project out to bid, as most contractors will be done their summer work and they'll be looking for some fall work. So hopefully that gets us a friendly number on the dugouts also. I think it is important for everyone to know the dugouts are identified in the 5-year capital project. So it's been something that's been talked about for a little while. So, and then there was turf ordered for the bullpen and the batting cages that we ordered, and we're just waiting for it to come. When it arrives, it'll be installed by the CSD. Our maintenance staff and our crew will install that turf. We'll put the fill in, and we'll make sure that the batting cage and the bullpen is all turf. So in the next couple of pictures, that's the backstop that we already replaced. So I think all of you, it's hard to see on the far right, there's a sign that tells them not to hit balls against the fence. One of the things that happens against those batting cages is, they like to throw the ball up and then a kid hits it and they hit it against the fence and they're warming kids up. Well, that ball just, dents the fence and gets the bottom to curl up. So it is a heavier gauge fence. That should help us, but hopefully some signage and working with our coaches and our community groups just will, prohibit a lot of that. Next slide, Dave, please. So what you're looking at here is on the right is the batting cage and on the left is the bullpen. So the bullpen used to go down, if you look at the parallel bar on the fence there, that's where the bullpen ended. So basically, if you were in the bullpen and you throw a wild pitch to your catcher, you might accidentally hit someone on that bleacher. So that was a safety reason why that was done. And then next photo, please. So that's the outlet that we trenched. And then on the left is the actual batting cage. You can't see it because it's mounted to the center pole on the batting cage on the left. So that's the outlet so that they could, again, put a machine in there that could actually pitch to a student athlete and they could actually hit off the machine inside the batting cage. And then last but not least, I thought this was important to just let the board see. So this was last Friday after last Thursday's heavy rains. So that was the softball field at about 7:30 a.m. When Mr. Kelly got it. And at 2:30 that afternoon, next slide, please, that's our softball field that Gene and his crew got ready. There were 5 Suburban 1 games canceled last Friday because their fields couldn't be played on, not ours. Again, we have a really talented, good turf crew. They do a great job, so they care for all our fields. So I thought it was important to show that so you get an idea of how hard they work to make sure that we can play. And we work with Mr. Bretz, obviously, to make sure, no one likes to reschedule. That always becomes a nightmare. So any questions on the softball field?
Is it tarped during the regular, like when it's not being played on, or is it just open to the?
It's
air?
open.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't tarp it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just one. Thanks.
And then I know this sort of goes back to a finance committee question, but how does this compare with regard to Title IX funding? I know it's hard with Chestnut Hill funding a lot of our baseball field, but just not sure how those discussions can be had or how we as board members, when members of the public may say it's really not fair, the baseball team has this, that, and the other. Any thoughts or feedback you can give on that? And again, we have an amazing deal with Chestnut Hill College of how we funded our remarkable baseball field. But any advice on any of that from any of the 3 gentlemen sitting over there, that would be great.
Yeah, I can speak for myself and the athletic directors at the middle school and the high school. I know that we try our best to make sure everybody gets equality on all the fields. Whether that's getting a girls' soccer game on a field that the boys play on. And I know that RJ works really hard to make sure that we have equality on the fields we're using right now. I think the upgrades and the suggestions for upgrades will probably always continue on both sides. So I think you're going to need it. It's going to be a cycle, right? We're going to make these upgrades to the softball field, and then you're going to start looking at another field and another field. So I can't speak to it financially. I can just speak to, I know what we do procedurally to try and make sure. And I know there's a pretty detailed document that RJ and I go through every year about field usage and who gets fields and how much time and things like that. From practice time to game time and things like that.
We think the board approved us adding the scoreboard 4 years ago. That was right when the baseball field was finished. And so now adding the dugouts we think is important for the students to have, so that we have equitable access, equitable facilities. We're really, especially in this area where they're not making any more land. Can we make improvements? Yes. But do we have wonderful facilities here? Absolutely. I can't tell you how many folks who visit here who I know from other school districts that call me and they just said, we had no idea what you had available to your students. And so we certainly will continue to make the improvements we need to make. And I think, the timeline Joe put together, we should have the dugouts then by next season.
Yep, that's the goal.
And so I think we'll be in really good shape.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
And I can also share with you that the PIAA will be ringing Mr. Bretz's phone for sure. Can we host playoff games on that field if it's not our team? And again, some of that may be location, but I don't believe, no matter how good your location is, if the field isn't, presentable for a playoff game, they're not going to ask to host a game there. And they ask to host games on our fields all the time.
Do we get paid for that?
No, we actually, they pay our workers to do it. So
they pay a fee for what it costs us to put the game on.
Right, they pay the fee that what it costs us.
No.
So yeah.
We do it because someday we're going to need a field or we're going to need a gym.
No doubt, yeah.
And they remember if we say no.
Yeah, there's actual talk that they're going to actually start mandating schools to take their turns. So we'll see what happens. RJ would know more about that than I would. So are there any other questions?
Yes, so Mr. Reed had sent us an email, and it sounds like you addressed a lot of these things in the presentation, but this is all new to me, so I'm just going to ask.
That's fine.
So it sounds like the dugouts you already talked about. It speaks a little bit more about the immediate timeline of the artificial turf needs with the batting cages and the bullpen. I didn't see artificial turf necessarily spoken about in there. Is that?
Yeah, it actually was.
So that was so that was the batting cage and bullpen piece?
Okay.
And then the last part, and I'm assuming this was the picture of the water that you showed, was the junior varsity playing surface?
The junior varsity field is on the other side of the FMC.
Okay.
So the junior varsity field just has unique challenges because it backs up to the basin that the township owes. So you have basically sheeting water. That's just a difficult area, but actually where our field is, we do pretty well. So I think maybe when Dr. Christian started, might have been right before you, Dr. Christian, I'm not sure, we swapped them properties. Believe it or not, the property behind the 4-5 building belonged to the township, and the property behind that last softball field belonged to us. And because they had so much flooding in the neighborhoods next door, they wanted to swap properties so that they could build that detention basin to stop the flooding for the neighbors. So there's issues on a field like you saw with the varsity field. And I am confident we have a great turf crew and they take care of those fields. If there's a game to be played and we can play it, they'll figure out a way to get it done. And it's not as easy as it sounds because you can only put so much dry mix on the field before it becomes maybe unsafe and becomes really hard. So they do a really good job. There's a lot of care into it. But as far as improvements,
same challenge with the JV baseball field because it's downhill. So
right.
Yeah.
So
just some sections where water
the
finds
drainage,
a way.
it's just drainage. Yeah. So in terms of the concern, though, how would you suggest that we reply per se in terms of the standing water and the needed perimeter edging?
Yeah, I've been in touch with Mr. Reed. I can reach out to him again and talk with him. I think he's realistic enough to understand with what we're dealing with, and that there's some of the things will just be, things that will need our attention when we get heavier rains. They're not things that happen on a regular rain.
We'll take care of the edging right away, and Joe's already replied.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Stupid question. These are the two fields that if you're looking at Victory Field, like where the circled pavilion is, if you walk straight back, not the one along the
Colonial Drive?
Colonial Drive.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Is there any other questions? If there's no other questions, I do have, I don't know if Mr. Zablaski had anything for transportation he wanted to add?
I just talked to Mr. Brown today. We get a weekly report from First Student. There are 2 additional bus drivers in the pipeline, so we're hoping that's a sign of good things to come. But we had a kind of a tough start today. We had, I think, 6 bus drivers call off. So that's hard under full capacity. But when 6 bus drivers, because the subs are driving every day, so we did work our way through it. It was better in the afternoon, but it's still a struggle to get people to come and drive bus. So we're going to continue to push First Student to try to get out there and get the word out that there's jobs available. But I think everybody's having the same issue.
We put together, Christopher and Dave put together a group of administrators where we meet just for an hour or two, and we're just brainstorming ideas to try to attract bus drivers, and then go out and try to float those ideas. We met with Teamsters representative, who we know also represents other organizations like UPS, and so I said, is there a partnership we could do there? And right now, all we're hearing is they want more drivers too. Everybody wants more drivers, and their hourly wage is a little bit more competitive than others. So it was creative, but didn't produce any drivers. But we'll continue to meet, and we'll attend all the township days, everything, ask for a student to go, distribute flyers. The board approved the district to try to hire drivers as Colonial employees. So we'll continue those efforts. But I think the spring, particularly Mondays and Fridays, I think are going to be, spring is challenging in every school on Mondays and Fridays. It's when folks use personal days, which they are obviously allowed to use. And so there's a dearth of spot drivers, there's a dearth of substitute teachers, so it'll be all hands on deck, that's for sure.
Do we have any data or feedback that reflects what would make it more attractive? Because I know that's a broader problem. It's not just our school district, but do we have any, I heard a little bit about the competitive nature of the funding, but that doesn't seem to be just our problem.
No,
that seems
it's
to be
not.
the problem across multiple school districts. So do we have data to figure out how could we make the jobs more attractive?
Only anecdotal. It's First Student shares with us. They're obviously competing with Amazon, competing with other companies that provide delivery services, whether it's students and or people going to work, or packages, or truck drivers. So I live 10.5 miles away, and I ride down Germantown Pike every day. And I counted 4 different stops along my 10-mile ride this morning where there are advertisements for people with CDL drivers for 4 different companies. So it's clearly a workforce issue. The attractiveness of it is, particularly if you live in the community and you're interested, if anybody's watching, you get to work the days that your kids are in school. You can work, you get their hours, and so you're available when they're home for the most part. We have great kids, and it's, and the drivers we have some dynamite drivers who do a great job, but it's going to be a problem for the next 3 to 5 years, without a doubt.
There's no partnership or anything we can do to help people get their CDLs, right? We can't partner with Monco or the tech school or something and say, hey, if you drive for us for a year, we fund your cost of getting it type thing?
Yeah, First Student's already offering all of those incentives, plus a several $1,000 signing bonus. flexible training hours. It's, you know, we talked to Saig too. We talked to Mr. Saig or Steve, I guess, October, November, and he had 8 empty buses sitting there, and he said, I want them on the road. And he says, I just need drivers. It's systemic in the region.
If there's no more questions, that's the last item on the agenda. Mrs. Epstein.
Okay, I think we talked about it a couple meetings ago about the high school with the auditorium and band room and stuff. Is there a time at which you guys will we can take another look at what we can do to spruce that up or redesign that, or what we can do?
Sure. So I'm sorry, you said the band room at PW?
I believe the band room, I was asked about the band room and the auditorium, so, you know, for performances and whatnot.
Right. Sure. We've had previous discussions about both areas. So there is some information I can provide to the board, or to Dr. Christian, that he can share with the board, that we looked at some potential improvements for those areas. It was more aesthetics for the auditorium, because the sound system in there, and I think the lighting is all relatively new. So in the auditorium, it would just be.
We should put together what was done during the last construction project at the high school that wrapped up 4.5 years ago. It was wrapping up as I came on board.
Okay.
And then, Drew, you can put together a list with Joe what new technologies are in the auditorium. In the band room, there was, when I got here, there was some consideration of adding there's difficulty for the larger instruments because it's a tiered room to get those out of the door. We manage. We did investigate potentially removing the tiers was one option, or creating another entrance that you could avoid having to go out the doors currently and just wheel out the back. So the adding another entrance was not feasible. And removing those tiers is going to be a challenge too. That would be a major undertaking. So, but we did manage to, you know, we assist, particularly when the band has to travel. We're still able to get those instruments out and get them loaded. So I think that was more of a functional approach rather than like there's no way to make it larger. But then I know when we had the teacher in there last year, we had an LTS in there last year. He went in and he did a great job. He cleaned out. I walked in one day. He had cleaned out all of the individual lesson rooms. There were boxes of like T-shirts and stuff in there. He had cleaned all of them out, just creating more space by reducing the clutter. So that was, he went above and beyond to do that. But then we'll put together what was done in the auditorium and from a technology standpoint, and then also from the lighting and other improvements that were made in there.
Thank you.
Another random FMT question. Year of COVID, things changed with outside groups coming in and using our facilities, particularly indoor. So now that things are, knock on wood, getting back to normal, I would love to get some information on how we have a policy that we passed that gives priority to groups that have majority Colonial School District participants, kind of thing. So just curious how that process has been working. So number one, I'm assuming the policy is being followed, of course. So obviously the policy is being followed, but what are the procedures? How do people access our fields? Are they all doing it online and via forms the proper way? Do we believe that they're filling out in earnest their participant information? And I'm just, because I want to make sure that our amazing facilities are being taken advantage of by our district taxpayers. And it's no disrespect to somebody from Bucks County, but or any other school district, don't come use our stuff. We're saving it for our peeps. So just curious how that's going, and then scheduling, how that all works. Like who does that? How does it? We don't need to talk about it right now. Maybe that's something we put on a future agenda item or something. But
We could put that together.
would love to get more information on that.
Yeah, I talked to a rep. Joe was in a meeting, so I took a call from a colleague who lives in the community asking about one of our facilities, and somebody had been allegedly turned down. Actually, they just had not yet submitted an application. So that got rectified in about 10 minutes. So it's very easy to use Master Library. And this board, which I love, is where I'll keep my personal stuff out of it, but this board has always said, you know, we want the facilities used and we want them used by our residents. And school is the town. And there are districts where it's a big revenue stream. And here it's not. You have to cover the cost of, you know, custodians and folks who are working, and that makes sense. But we want our facilities used, and we're already getting requests for the new gym over at the middle school. So yeah, shocking. But we're certainly equitable, and when we have competing interests, we get into the more heavier detail as far as how many residents they have. Yep. And they have to sign off on everything, which classification they fall under, and that determines the rate they get charged. And Dave came on board, and then Lynn started over in Joe's office. The billings got very efficient, and the follow-up is very quick. So I think we have a good relationship, but we'll put together a presentation.
In regards to the rates and the chart that we have about who pays what for the facilities, how long has it been since we looked at those numbers? And is it time to look at them again?
Probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe we should look at them again.
It was before Terry was still here.
Yes.
So we should take a look at that.
Okay.
We'll make that part of the whole presentation.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw in another random thought. Wayfinding. I do think that our amazing fields, and there's 4 fields there, and you don't know which one's victory 1, 2, 3, 4. And I know there was a sign there that got dented up and beat up a little bit, but just making sure that opposing teams who come in can find our stuff. We do have good wayfinding, but just maybe like an assessment.
Right.
You know, drive around a little bit and see if there
Part
might
of
be.
our strategy to throw them off their game. We want
Yeah.
God, Mike beat me to it.
They arrived late. They couldn't find the
I was gonna say,
field.
it's to keep the Bucks County people away.
to make them walk to
Kathy.
the other side, walk back.
That's not fair. Okay. I like the advantage though.
I kid.
But just a quick look over. I trust obviously that you'll know where to do where, but I do know that it can be quite confusing because it is a large campus. There's a lot
Sure.
going on.
That's easy. Anything else?
Just a thank you to Plymouth Township. They continue to be very helpful for our middle school sports teams, and they have done a great job offering their fields right behind the firehouse there. And
Yes.
I was talking to Mr. Failer and Mr. Kaplan, and the words they used were Plymouth Township rolled out the red carpet for us. So we'll be sending them a thank you and another request until we get our
Yeah,
So we get our
Sean
project
Mazie
done.
and Phil Brady. I think
and
most
then
of
we
you
will
guys-
reciprocate if they need obviously help.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were
Mhm.
great. Joe and Bob said they'd be great, and they have been great. So
I have a question. I know a lot of the organizations that I work with that use the fields, they often want to be able to give back or help improve the fields they're on rather than just keep asking for stuff. Is there like a wish list you guys could submit, or like hey, here's kind of stuff you guys could do to help? Like, you know, there's debates about sheds and boxes and stuff, or like lining things, and like if there's stuff that local organizations that use the fields can do to contribute. If you like, hey, XYZ, if you guys want to put in your budgets next year, these are things that we would appreciate. Is that an option?
we can.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful idea, but it's also a challenge too, because whenever the board accepts a gift or a donation, you're also accepting responsibility for it, and the maintenance and upkeep of it. So it's great for a couple years, but as a volunteer in my own local town's organization, things get turned over. You get new presidents, new treasurers, and so maybe sometimes the priorities change. And so then suddenly, if you have a shed that becomes 5 to 10 years old that was donated, so I don't want to say no. I just want to make sure we're very specific in how we accept those things, so that we make sure that the fields stay in solid condition.
Okay.
All righty. If there's no other comment, then this meeting is adjourned. Oh, did I? Okay, good. Sorry. I just making sure. That's not, yeah, public, we already asked about public. Oh, I'm sorry. Is there public comment? Okay, thanks. Now this meeting is officially adjourned.
I think we have a very brief agenda for HR, if the board's okay to continue moving forward.